At the doctrine of checks and balances. The doctrine or principle of checks and balances advocates the use of one organ of government to check the activities of other organs. This is where the power of one organ are used to check the powers of the others. These constitutional acts of checks, abuse of office, constitutional violation, and naked use of powers by different organs of government. The doctrine of checks and balances does not advocate vision of the three organs of government in the performance of their constitutional functions. All it is saying is that inasmuch as these organs will be mutually independent, they should act as watchdog of each other to avoid misuse of power and to reconcile these organs. The doctrines of checks and balances applies in both parliamentary and presidential system of government. For instance, the executive can hand veto the legislative bill. It can also discuss parliament as well as make judicial appointments and promotions. On the other hand, the legislature can check the executive powers to appoint ministers. It can set up committees to investigate activities of executives. To investigate activities of executive, check the executive powers to appoint ministers. In like manners, the judiciary has the power to review both the executive and judicial actions. It has the power to declare the activities of either the executive or the legislature null and void and without effect. So the concept of principle of checks and balances is saying how the three organs of government should checkmate the activities of each other or one another, so that one organ cannot become so powerful. One organ cannot abuse its own offices. We've seen a situation wherein, for instance, Parliament, which is charged with the responsibility of making laws, can also check the powers of the executive arms of government, where you have the president as the chief executive. The constitution, it gives the power to the president to appoint ministers, but they have to go through a parliamentary approval. Of course, the parliament at the same time can also be checkmated by the executive arms of government through the presidential assent. If bills are being passed into parliament before they can be enacted into a law, they also requires the signature of the president. So therefore, one organs of government is also checkmating the organs of others. That is what the concept of the concept of checks and balances is trying to promote. That this doctrine is saying that, of course, they advocate that the use of the organs of government to check the activities of others. So wherein the powers of one organ to check of another organs of government. So we prevent a situation wherein one organs of government will become so powerful to the extent that they can dictate to the others. That is what the concept is saying. Because if these organs of government, they are not checkmating the activities of others, that is a huge problem. For instance, even parliament, it is being, the judiciary organs of government, like the chief justice and others, they have to go through parliamentary approval and with the recommendation of the president. But yet still, these the judicial organs of government also has the right to declare the actions of the executive arms of government and parliament unconstitutional if what they've done is not within the provision of the constitution of the state. So let's look at the principle of checks and balances, and of course how it violates the principle of separation of powers. 1. The application of the principle of checks and balances render the theory of separation of powers meaningless. For instance, the constitutional powers of impeachment of the president granted the legislature makes these executive arms of government dependent and subordinate to the legislature. So the concept of separation of powers is saying the three organs of government should be separated in terms of control, functions, and passionaries. But the situation we are in, we see most of these organs of government, they are also interfering with the activities of the others. That is a huge problem. So therefore, it undermines the concept of separation of powers developed by Baron de Montesquieu. Then also, the power to veto act of parliament granted to the president makes the president, who is the head of the executive, to be part of the lawmaking body. The legislature and this acts as a violation of the theory of separation of power because it amounts to fissioning the executive and the legislature. So another way the principle of checks and balances undermines the concept of separation of powers is that there is a veto act of parliament, that is, the president has a right to sign a bill before it can be enacted into a law. So it means the president, who is also part of the executive arms of government, who is also the head of the executive, is also part of the lawmaking body. And what the concept of separation of powers is saying, these three organs of government must be separated in terms of control, functions, and passionaries. But we discover that one organ of government is also performing the functions of another organs of government because of the concept of checks and balances. Then of course, the undemocratic act of allowing the unelected members of the judiciary to declare executive actions and laws made by the legislature as unconstitutional makes mockery of the theory of separation of powers and independence of these organs. Inasmuch as the judicial organs of government is not being elected by the people, but at the end of the day, it has the mandate to declare executive actions and laws made by the legislature as unconstitutional. It makes a mockery of the theory of separation of powers. Of course, the president, who is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, who can also declare war, this capacity against another country can be incapacitated by the legislature refusal of 2/3 majority required by the president. So inasmuch as the president has a power to declare war, but it has to go through parliamentary approval with 2/3 majority. So it means parliament is also interfering with the work of the executive arms of government, which is a legislature. Then of course, the application of the usual procedure by the legislature in the process of impeachment tantamount to usurpations of the judicial functions by the legislature, thereby making the theory of separation of powers a hoax. By the power of approving the executive nominees and budget given to the legislator, the legislators therefore participate in the executive functioning, thereby rendering the theory of separation of powers unreliable. Of course, the principle of checks and balances also violate the theory of separation of powers by the fact that the president names or all federal judges or approval has to go through the legislature. The power of approval of all treaties concluded by the executive granted to the legislators makes the legislator to participate in the executive functions of the government. Don't forget to hit on the subscribe button so whenever we upload any tutorial you get direct access to it. Okay, so you can also click on the subscribe button and also make comment as well. So we're looking at how the concept of checks and balances, the principle of checks and balances, can undermine the principle of separation of powers, because the principle of separation of powers is saying one organs of government should not interfere with the activities with another organs of government in terms of their control functions and passionaries. But with the concept of checks and balances, we've seen a situation that one for the fact that they approved